Mohammed bin Salman was in absolute control of the kingdom's intelligence and security services, meaning such an operation would not have been carried out without his authorization. It notes that the Crown Prince saw Khashoggi as a threat and broadly backed violence if it was needed to silence him. The report lists 21 individuals U.S. intelligence has high confidence were complicit or culpable for Khashoggi's death in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. They include 7 members of the Crown Prince's elite personal protective detail. So we're now joined by our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett. And Kimberly, I suppose this report really confirms what has long been suspected about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
There's no question about it. Highly anticipated already. The link has crashed. So many in the United States and around the world trying to access this report that has been declassified by the Director of National Intelligence. It certainly is confirming what many had long suspected, that the conclusion of the U.S. intelligence services is that the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered the murder of the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The report cites a number of reasons why this conclusion has been reached. It says based on the capabilities or decision-making abilities of the Saudi Crown Prince and the direct involvement of his security detail in the operations. Also, that the Crown Prince viewed Jamal Khashoggi as a threat to the kingdom and broadly supported violent measures to silence him. Now, it goes on further in the report to say that Saudi officials overall had prepared, according to U.S. intelligence, unspecified operations against Khashoggi. It's unclear if those were violent. However, it says that if those involved knew of the extent of the operation is also unclear. But certainly there was a feeling in the conclusion of this report that there was an environment that many of those working intimately in the security details for the Crown Prince may have been intimidated, felt like they must carry out tasks for fear of being arrested or facing harm themselves. So there's no question that when it comes to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, that the U.S. intelligence, as long suspected, now that this report has been declassified, has concluded that this was ordered directly by the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
Of course, we know that President Biden spoke to the Saudi king ahead of the publication of this report. I suppose the question now is what, if any, action will be taken against those deemed culpable for the murder?
The White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, speaking aboard Air Force One just about in the last hour or so, was asked this very question. Would there be a travel ban put in place? Would there be sanctions? We're getting a clearer picture. Although this has not been officially announced, it is being widely reported based on a fact sheet sent to members of Congress that, in fact, something known as the Khashoggi policy is being considered that would apply sanctions to 76 Saudis that would impose visa restrictions on individuals engaged in counter-dissident activities. So this could include even beyond the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to include other adversaries of the United States that are known to allegedly be committing actions in the United States that include intimidation. Russia, for example, China, Iran. So this is apparently an action that is being considered. What we should point out in all of this is that Congress had tried under the Trump administration to take action before. In fact, there was broad bipartisan support based on this report that we are now seeing that they had seen previously that prompted them this bipartisan punitive action against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Of course, it was a very different administration then, one that in fact turned a blind eye despite saying that it would hold the highest levels of the Saudi government accountable. Donald Trump used his veto power to block efforts by Congress to block weapons sales to Saudi Arabia, among other actions. So the report being released is being applauded by members of at least the Democratic Party on Capitol Hill. In fact, one senior senator saying that we must ensure there are real consequences for Mohammed bin Salman. If not, autocrats around the world will get the message impunity is the rule. So this is already being well received in the United States, highly anticipated, and again, the headline being of this report is the conclusion of the U.S. intelligence agencies. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered the killing of the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
Thank you very much. Kimberly Halkett, our White House correspondent. On ahead now to Istanbul, where Sinem Khosroglou joins us. our correspondent Sinem. And so, Sinem, Turkey played a pretty crucial role in the early days in terms of keeping up the pressure on the international community and releasing a stream of evidence that really undermined those early denials from Riyadh about involvement in the murder. Tell us about reaction there.
Well, Miriam, actually, this is not a shock for Turkey because the report that has been declassified is actually absolutely matching with the Turkish rhetoric and the file that was prepared by Istanbul Chief Prosecutor's Office about this killing. So basically, as you said, there were some evidences, and the most important evidence was the voice recordings that was gathered from inside the consulate building. Actually, those were like around 10 bugs that have been planted probably by the Turkish intelligence inside the Saudi consulate earlier due to some other bilateral challenges. And the voice recordings of those bugs actually changed the course of this prosecution and evidence gathering. And I remember back at that time, the former CIA director, Mrs. Haspel, also came to the Turkish capital, Ankara, with a delegation of 21. And at that time, their Turkish counterparts made them listen of the whole recordings. Actually, Turkey shared some of the very important parts of those voice recordings with their EU counterparts as well. But whole recordings were actually physically shared with the U.S. intelligence team, and there were some technical members, there were some analysts, there was also an expert by United States who was actually professionally following up with the Saudi dissidents abroad. So basically those voice recordings, and especially the telephone signals that were gathered afterwards, the talkings between the members of this hit squad before the killing, after the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, inside the consulate, those were actually carefully studied by the Turkish police and the Turkish intelligence units, and carefully collected by the Istanbul Prosecutor's Office. And for instance, Turkish President Erdogan, who has been very vocal about this killing, has never recited the Crown Prince's name as Mohammed bin Salman. He always he always preferred to talk with his counterpart, which is King Salman. He never mentioned Mohammed bin Salman, but he always said this killing could never have happened without an order from the very top official person inside the royal kingdom, pointing out to Mohammed bin Salman. Basically, the Turkish security sources that I just spoke ahead of prior to this live shot told me that like around 70–80% of what this report that has been declassified actually is based on what the Turkish intelligence shared with the U.S. counterparts. And apparently the U.S. intelligence also had some extra information, and they came up with this assessment that Mohammed bin Salman ordered the killing. Of course, this is a change of tone, and in Turkey there is this trial ongoing. There are 26 suspects in the Jamal Khashoggi killing trial, and next week there will be a trial. Of course, no one expects a verdict, but
yes,
at least this report supports that. Yeah,
as you say,
the
decision to release the report very significant. Thank you very much, Sinem Khashoggi in Istanbul. John Donnelly is with us now, chair of the National Press Club Press Freedom Team. Joins me now from Skype. By Skype from Washington. So the report really confirms what many already knew, that the Saudi Crown Prince sanctioned the premeditated murder of Jamal Khashoggi. How significant a step is this in terms of the understanding, the transparency, accountability for the death of Khashoggi?
It is an extremely important step. It was ridiculous that the United States government was not publicly acknowledging what had been widely reported and known, which was that Mohammed bin Salman did ultimately bear responsibility for the gruesome act in Turkey. And so it's refreshing to see an administration that is going to just tell the truth about this. The previous administration actually violated the law, because the United States Congress had passed a law and the president had signed it, containing a provision that required an unclassified assessment of what happened. including the accountability of any senior Saudi officials. So that law had been completely flouted. So it is good news that we are finally talking about this openly, and that the administration is going to, in their words, recalibrate their relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia to account for this kind of thing instead of just look the other way.
What is your reading of when you say the recalibration? We know that the president spoke with the Saudi king before the release of this report, perhaps to soften the blow. We know that America has also spoken about the Saudis' right to defend its sovereignty in the region. A recalibration doesn't mean a fundamental change or shift in the relationship.
Great point. And I definitely don't want to overstate that because it will be on the margins where things will be affected. The Biden administration has already restricted arms sales and cooperation between the United States and the Saudis in the prosecution of their war in Yemen. But fundamentally, the Saudi government and the nation of Saudi Arabia is too important to the strategic interests of the United States for us to just sever relations with them. So I think for the most part, things will continue as before, but not completely. And exactly how they will be changed on the margins is still to be determined. Your correspondent earlier was talking about the possibility of sanctions. I would not be at all surprised if that happens, if Saudi officials are sanctioned because of the Khashoggi murder. But again, it's TBD. But at least it's not this what the Trump administration did, which was act as if nothing had changed, as if nothing had happened. And that was an affront to journalists everywhere, and that's who I'm speaking on behalf of. We had 21 journalists killed just for doing their jobs across the world in 2020. Jamal Khashoggi's murder in 2018 was just a particularly heinous and gruesome example of something that happens far too often worldwide.
Do you fear something like that could happen again?
You mean at the hands of the Saudi government?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
abroad. I mean, with these sort of circumstances.
Yes. I mean, I think it's less likely, though, now that they are being publicly shamed about this by the President of the United States, even if he hasn't directly said anything, at least not yet, pointing the finger at Mohammed bin Salman. The fact that this has happened, I think, makes less likely the fact that they'll do something like this again. I don't even know that they necessarily intended for things to turn out with Khashoggi as they did. They may have wanted something short of a murder to happen, but the assessment of the intelligence community was that Mohammed bin Salman authorized the capture or kill of Khashoggi. So yes, this could happen going forward. I tend to think it's less likely, but this is a regime that violates human rights quite broadly, in a lot of different ways, not just for journalists, but for other outspoken people inside Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much. John Donnelly, Chair of the National Press Club Press Freedom Team.